I was 19 when I got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And so for about a year and a half, I was on some pretty heavy steroids and different medicine to kind of slow the progression of it. And I wasn't going into remission. So when I was 20, I ended up in the hospital a couple of times. And then in December of that year, it was 1999, I ended up in the hospital again. I had really high fevers, like 105. And so they kept me and they did some testing and decided that they needed to remove my large intestine immediately. Within 24 hours, I would die. And I was so scared. I was so young. I didn't want to do surgery. I was in denial. I kept thinking, I'm going to get better. You know, when you're young, you feel fearless. But they did end up removing my large intestine and gave me a colostomy bag. And they said within 6 weeks, we'll do what's called a J pouch, where they take your small intestine and loop it. And that does the work of your large and small intestine, basically. Everything's internal and you don't need a colostomy bag. So they did the surgery, everything was fine. And then that was on December 23rd. And then New Year's Eve, I was still in the hospital recovering and my nurses were checking on me. And suddenly I felt my body, to me, it felt like my body was lifting off the bed. I was laying down, so it just felt like my body was kind of floating up. And I was so confused. I thought, this is really not normal. The bed doesn't lift up that high. What's going on? And the nurses didn't seem to notice, so I didn't say anything to my family. They were in the room as well. No one seemed to notice it. So after the nurses left, I felt my body kind of float down. I was like, well, I'm not going to talk about this. It's kind of weird. And that was Y2K that night, New Year's Eve. So everyone was kind of concerned that the machines would shut down or what would happen with the year 2000 coming in. And nothing happened after that. I stayed in my bed. The machines were fine. We rang in the new year. And then a couple of days later, stomach opened up and my smell. So I was rushed back into recovering again. And then a week later, it happened again. And this is when I started leaving my body. They went into surgery, and during surgery, I guess I got quite a bit of sepsis in my body. And so when they took me out of surgery, I'd had 3 major surgeries in a very short time, and my body just crashed. I started developing breathing problems to where I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was suffocating to death. And I was diagnosed with ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And basically my lungs were filling with fluid and I was suffocating. It was a horrifying feeling. So I was in what's called shock trauma. It's the very critical part of the hospital. And I had 6 to 8 nurses at all times on my care trying to stabilize me. My family was there. I was married and my parents were there. I had 3 brothers that were in and out during this time. So I had a lot of family around. The night of that surgery and then into the next morning, I developed 107.5 degree fever. And my body just completely, it was tired. So as they were trying to stabilize me, they realized that they needed to intubate me to resuscitate me. I wasn't breathing. So they took me into a room to do that procedure. And as they were doing the procedure, I suddenly was off to the side of the room and I could see the nurses stationed to the right and I could see a bed to the left. And there was a young girl in the bed with nurses all around. They were working fast. The scene was chaotic and the girl was definitely struggling. And I felt really bad for her. I thought, that poor girl, she looks like she's in a lot of pain. She looks scared. And so I watched him for a few minutes, kind of like a movie, not knowing what was going on. And then suddenly I realized that that girl was me. And I didn't have any connection to the body at all. It was a body. It wasn't me. I was off to the side of the room. And it shocked me that I didn't recognize her. But as they stabilized her, I just kind of watched. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in the shock trauma hospital room with the nurse. I was intubated. And there was a nurse next to me. They tied me down to keep me from pulling out my tubes. And then over the next 3 weeks, I was able to leave my body whenever I needed to. It was the most amazing feeling in the world. It was incredible. So the first thing that happened after that, I was in my room and suddenly I felt kind of like my soul just shot out of my body and I was in this tunnel going at a fast speed, the tunnel. And there was a man with me that he was in a suit with a hat, like a top hat. And he stayed with me. And I was scared because we were moving so fast. And suddenly I'd pop back to my body because I was nervous. And it would happen again and again. And so finally on the 3rd day, I quit sleeping because I didn't know what was happening and it was scary. And then the nurses gave me something to, put me to sleep and it stopped. And I didn't know who that person was. Blinded. So the nurses, they sedated me and I I started going to sleep and I didn't go up that tunnel anymore. And I didn't know who that man was, but I felt very comfortable with him and calm. I just didn't understand what the tunnel was and why it was so dark. And we were moving so fast that that was really what scared me because I never moved that fast. It's like if you're in a car driving really, really fast with your head out the window. And it was just scary. 25 years after this incident, my cousin had heard me talk about my experience and she texted me and said, I think I know who this person is. Do you know who it is? And I said, no, I don't know. And so she gave me the name of my great great grandfather. And I looked him up in our records and saw a picture of him, and that was the man that was in the tunnel with me. I had never met him in this life. He had passed away way before I was born, and I didn't know much about him or his history, but he was the person in the tunnel with me. And that was really comforting because it showed that when our family passes, they're still around us. And even if we don't know them, they are part of our life's work and story. So that was pretty exciting to finally, after 25 years, know who he was. But after that experience, fevers continued to be very, very high. And at one point, I couldn't handle the pain anymore. I had an 8-inch incision on my stomach, tons of pain. I was just a mess. And so as they were working on me, they put ice around my entire bed, just covered me in ice to bring down the fever. And suddenly I just popped out of my body, my soul. And I was in front of this beautiful building. It was kind of sandstone with 2 pillars in the front of it, very tall door. And I remember thinking, that door is so tall. And I'm 5'3". This door was like twice my size, my height. And I wanted to be in the building. And I could feel an energy behind me to my right of my shoulder. And it was a male energy. And as I thought to myself, I want to be in that building, I was suddenly inside the building. I didn't even walk through the door. And I could feel the energy with me the entire time. So I stood in the entrance for a minute and watched the people that were in there. They were reading books and kind of almost just gaining information and knowledge. And then I found myself in a room full of thousands and thousands of books. It was a round room with gorgeous wood, dark wood. There were scrolls and there was no ceiling. The books went on forever and they were leather-bound books in different colors. I love to read and I was like, I could stay here forever. And so this guide, I ended up calling him my guide. He showed me the scrolls and they had ancient symbols on them. And I could read him. I could understand him. Anything I read in that room, I could understand. He told me that once I left that room, I would lose that knowledge. And so I don't know what exactly, if it was the Akashic records or what it was. I think it was. But after I left that room, I lost the knowledge besides what it looked like. And I found myself in the entrance again. And to the right, there was an area, there was a pedestal that you could give talks on. And I felt very drawn to it. So as I thought I should be over there, suddenly I'm kind of gliding. And I still have all my earthly thoughts. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I am like floating. And so as I moved towards this podium area, it moved to the left. And there was an entrance with stairs. And I didn't feel scared. I thought I need to be down there. And so I walked down the stairs and into the basement area was water. There were pools of water, waterfalls, ponds, rivers. It was just amazing. And I had my guide with me and everything was very ancient sandstone. It felt like maybe Jerusalem or something. And there was a big, huge pool of water to my right and it looked really deep. And I just wanted to be in that water. And so I walked into the water and kind of held onto the side, like had my arms on the side of it like this. And I love water, but I don't swim well. I'm not a strong swimmer. And there was no bottom to this water, but I wasn't scared. And it was just so clear. You could just see forever. And as I sat in the water, I could kind of just splash the water from side to side, kind of like moving it like this. And I could hear it hitting the edges. And I felt like it was healing my body. And my guide just kind of sat beside me outside of the water and just let me just partake of the water. And as I did, I watched the other people in the water. And there were quite a few people. And I remember knowing that they needed to be of a pure soul to be in there. And it didn't make sense at the time, but that's just what I was told. They had to be pure. And there was a mother and her 2 children that I watched the most. They seemed to kind of hold my attention. And they were just splashing in this waterfall. And I knew that this water was healing them. I don't know what their story was, but I knew that whoever was in that water needed that healing energy to help whatever was happening in their life. And I was able to go there quite a few times at my sickest. And it didn't heal me right away. Like I didn't leave the water and I was fine. But I really do think it helped my body to cling on and survive through this. And I think without that, I had a 4% chance to survive. So I don't know how I did, but I did. And I am grateful for that. At one point, I saw the doctors in a tent. I found my soul over this beautiful meadow. There was just long green grass, and it was swaying almost to music. And every single blade of grass had energy to it and love. And there were these two huge trees with the base of the trees were almost gold, like it just kind of glittered. And there was just so much love. All of the plants and the trees and everything, the blue sky, they all gave love. And there was a white tent below. There's two of them attached. And my guide was there. And I thought, I wonder what's going on down there. And as I thought that, we started to kind of float towards the tents underneath them. And it was a medical clinic type thing that was set up. There were tables and petri dishes and tons of huge medical books. And there were doctors in white lab coats, and they were working at a really fast pace. And I knew that they were trying to find something to help somebody. And as I watched them, they didn't notice me, but it did seem to bother me. But my guide said, they don't know how to heal you. Prayer alone that you will survive. And I truly, truly believe that prayer is what saves us and helps us. It doesn't have to be attached to religion. We all have the ability to pray. But whenever my doctor would go in for surgeries, I ended up having 13 at that point in time. He would always say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but when I get in there, we'll figure it out. And it was true. I mean, I kept having massive amounts of infection. They were constantly going in for surgery. They had done something to my left side and paralyzed it. So I couldn't walk. I would drag my left side. And so I was pretty critical. My hair was falling out. Gained 60 pounds when I went into the hospital, and then I got down to 79 pounds. So there was a lot of medical stuff going on, a lot of blood transfusions, and I developed diabetes at that point. So the doctors were really stumped. They had so many residents that would come in every day to see if they could figure out how to help me. But I would tell my family, I was with my grandma and she said, I'm going to be okay. And my family would watch me and they could see that all of a sudden I would go kind of still. My eyes wouldn't blink and they didn't feel like I was there. And so they knew stuff was happening. And luckily they were pretty open to it and they would listen when I would tell them what was happening. So I didn't feel so alone. But I was on a ventilator for a while. And so I had a piece of paper I could try to write on. I didn't have a lot of ability to do that. I had a lot of tubes and it was hard to write. But at one point, my aunt who had passed away appeared in the room. And she'd been gone for a couple years, and she asked if I wanted to go to her house to see her husband, who was still alive. I was like, yeah. We didn't even fly or anything. We were just in the entrance of the house as soon as we thought it. He was there watching TV. The house looked exactly the same. Nothing had changed. It was still very 1970s looking. And she said to me, he's going to fall in the hallway. And as she said this, I could see him in their hallway, and he was on the ground, and I could feel his emotions, and I knew that he was very scared and that he didn't have anyone there to help him to get up. And she said he's going to pass from his injuries. And so we were there for just a few minutes and then I was back in my body. And I'm trying to tell my family, like, you need to go check on him. He's probably dead on the floor, but I didn't have the words. I was ventilated. I couldn't write it down. And so over 3 days, I kept trying to tell them, go check on him. And when they finally understood what I was saying, they had my grandpa go check on him. He lived across the street and he said he was fine. So I was glad he was fine, but I was like, that was pretty real. I mean, I don't understand why he still is here. But 15 years after that happened, he actually did fall in the hallway, the same spot, and he passed from his injuries. He was by himself when it happened. And when I got the call, it was very validating to know that what I'd seen was exactly what happened. And it also helped enforce the knowledge that there's no time on the other side. And when I was out of my body, I had no pain. I felt this immense, immense amount of love that I've never experienced here. And I have an incredible family and they love me very much, but this was a different kind of love. It flowed through your soul in such a way that it just spoke to me. It was this amazing love and there was no stress. I didn't worry about my medical bills that were stacking up. I didn't worry about my health because I was cocooned in this love and I was safe. I felt very safe. I felt like I was home again. And so whenever I left my body, I immediately felt at peace and I wanted to stay there. And I would have if I was given a chance, but I wasn't. But at one point, the aunt that I'd seen, I was in my grandmother's backyard, which is across the street from my aunt's house. It was dark and my soul was there. And I noticed that there was these orbs that were kind of floating across the yard, in the back of the yard. And it was like the sky was lit up with tons of stars, but it was very quiet, almost like we were in a snow globe. And the first big orb that floats by is my great-grandfather, and then my grandmother, whose house this was, and then my aunt. And there were a bunch of other orbs too that were to me, it was like a lava lamp, just very glittery and energy was moving and they were different sizes. And I didn't understand what was happening, but it was really, really cool to watch. It was just very calming. And they kind of floated from the right of the yard to the left, and then they disappeared into the area where she had a garden. And then I just thought calmly, okay, I can go back to my body. And I went back in. And as these things were happening, it felt really normal. I mean, if you think about it, you don't just pop out of your body. It's not a normal thing to do. But for me, it felt very normal. I didn't question it. I just looked forward to it and knew that I was getting a reprieve from the pain that I was having. At one point, my husband's grandmother was at the hospital and she kept rubbing my arm and telling me, you need to fight, you need to fight. And I'm thinking, I don't want to fight. I just want to die. And as she's telling me this, I suddenly find myself in this area with horses in a barn and in stable. And there's three horses, and there's two on one side, and then there's an area in the middle for walking, and there's a horse on the other side. And I'm petting these horses, just kind of rubbing their faces, and I'm angry that I'm being told to fight when I don't think I can. My body's breaking down, and I just don't want to fight. I'm tired. And I can see from the side, I can see Grandma Dar in the hospital saying, you need to fight. We need you. We need you. And I was getting more and more angry. And I looked down and there was this rope on the ground. It was just like probably a foot long. And I grabbed it and I just started pulling on it and screaming at the top of my lungs and thinking, I don't want to do this anymore. Please release me from his body. And the more I screamed, the more my body relaxed. And I felt this feeling of, it's going to be okay. You're loved and you're protected. And once I got back into my body after that, it kind of called me and I thought, you need to fight. You really do. You have this chance to survive and you need to take it, but it can't be done without you. And so I kind of tried to change my attitude from every day thinking, okay, maybe I'll die today, to trying to really push harder to survive. So when they'd come in every day to walk, I had to walk every day to prevent blood clots. I would try to walk without crying. And it was quite a ordeal just to get me up in the, because I had so many tubes everywhere. But I thought I need to really fight harder. And the nice thing is that throughout this, I could leave my body. It was over a 3-week period. If stuff was happening that was too hard, I would leave my body. And I'm so grateful for that experience because I don't think if I would have been in my body the entire time, I could have handled it. When they took out the vent, finally, my mom was sitting next to me. And as the nurse took it out, suddenly the wall of the hospital across from my bed opened up to this, like a jungle, almost vegetation, just tons and tons of green plants and trees. It was gorgeous. And there was a waterfall. And I thought, I want to be in there. And so as soon as I thought that I was in the vegetation, I was able to walk around. There was an area that had grass. It was like an old house, probably from the 1800s. It had rocks on the side. And there was a pond with it and a water wheel. And the water was just, they go in circles. And I just sat there and watched it for a while. And I was so calmed. And I love water now. It's my thing after all of this. But after I got back into my body, I turned to my mom and I was trying to explain to her that my understanding of water being healing and telling her to drink the water that they'd given me. They had a little pink sponge I could wet my mouth with. And I kept trying to push the water into her face because I couldn't talk. And I wanted her to experience this loving water. And she's probably like, what is she doing? But I just knew that the water was very healing that was around us. And to this day now, I chew ice constantly. Like I'm constantly in the water, the ponds and the lakes and stuff. It's very, very healing to me. And I just want to be there all the time. As I got more critical, I found myself at the entrance to heaven. And I knew it was heaven. It didn't have any golden gates or anything, but I knew that it was. And I had my guide with me. He was always, always with me and always behind my right shoulder. And there were thousands of souls on each side of this entrance. And it's hard to explain what it looked like, but it was almost like we were in the clouds, but we weren't falling through the clouds. It was just very soft, welcoming environment. And all of these souls had like this lit energy about them. I couldn't see their faces because they were so brilliantly lit with light, but I knew that they were relatives and friends that had been with me in this life, before this life, and that I would know after. And they were in these beige robes, but there was just thousands of them, and I could feel their love, and they were so excited for me to be back. And I knew every single one of them, and I knew that I needed to get past that entrance to be able to stay in heaven. So it became this goal in my mind: get past that point, no matter how you need to be there. And when you're on the other side, you telepathically communicate. There's no speaking with words. It's almost like your heart speak is the best way to describe it. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm just going to tell my guide that I'm going to go visit my grandma at her garden, and then I don't have to come back. And as I thought that, my guide, I know he could understand what I was saying. And I just immediately heard, it's not your time. You have to go back. And I immediately popped back into my body and I was devastated. I knew that was the one chance to leave my body and not have to come back. And I'd messed it up, is how I felt. But I laughed afterwards because he could hear all my thoughts in my mind as I'm planning my escape. It's funny to me that he just he's probably thinking, boy, she's so stubborn, but I was still able to kind of leave my body. There was another experience that when I first got into shock trauma, when I was at my sickest, I found myself in this, it was like a rectangle room and it was very, very lit, tons of lighting. Like I didn't see lights, but it just felt very lit. And there was this older man and woman that they were just sitting in there. And I asked who they were, and they told me that they were angels, that they ministered to the patients in the hospital. And they told me that I could come with them. And so we went to a couple of the different rooms in shock trauma, and they would put their hands on the shoulders of the patients and their families. And as they did, the light would transfer from them to the family. And it was this very healing energy. And they were so loving. And so we'd go to different rooms. So there was a younger kid in his late teens that had been in a car accident. His parents and brother were there. And they told me if we see God in the door of the room that we'd been in, there was a glass window on the top. If we see God, then we know that this patient is going to pass away, and we help transition them to the other side, and we comfort their family. And if we don't see him, we know that patient is going to live, and we help heal them. And at one point we did see God in the window. And I was raised in a pretty strict religious home, but I'd really pushed back on religion. So it actually shocked me to see who I considered God, source, whatever you want to call him. There's multiple names. But I was really shocked that that was part of my experience because it wasn't something I expected. But as soon as I saw his face, I knew him. I knew that we had been together before this life, and I could feel his love for me and the knowledge that he loved every single one of us. Wasn't just me. I wasn't this special, important person. He felt love for every one of his children, and he hurt when they hurt, and he understood our pain and struggles. And this life isn't easy. We all have trials. No one gets out of here unscathed. And so to know that he understood that pain, even though it's hard when we are in trials, was very comforting to me. And he was just this beautiful man. It's funny to call him beautiful, but he had like this iridescent white hair that was about to here, and a beard and a mustache, and these piercing blue eyes. And when you look into his eyes, it was like you could see the universe. And he had very soft skin. I mean, he felt very ancient and old, but he also felt very, happens pretty often. As I saw God, I just knew that he loved me and all of his children. And after he left, the angels went to that family and they put their hands on the shoulders of the family. And I could just see the love that they were giving them. And after I asked the angels, why am I suffering so much? Why is this happening? And they told me that I had agreed to take on some of my brother's trials in this life. And that's why my recovery was slowed down. And at the time he was a teenager and I didn't understand it, but he did have some health struggles with his baby later on when he was an adult. And so maybe that's what it was. But it was interesting for them to kind of give me some knowledge of why I was going through what I was going through, because I felt very angry part of it, because I'd been so healthy before and suddenly I was not healthy. I couldn't even sit up by myself. And I am a very stubborn person. And so to be in a situation where I can't take care of myself was very upsetting to me. I needed help for everything. And I thought, what if I never recover from this? I can't live like this. But after about 3 weeks in intensive care, I did actually start to heal. And as I was starting to heal, these two children started showing up at the foot of my bed, and they would bring an old man with them sometimes. And the boy was about 10, the girl was about 6. And they would show up pretty often. And so a couple of times my mom was there when it happened. And I would just say, there's the kids again. And my family did not see the kids, but I would explain to them what they looked like. The boy had curly blonde hair and hazel eyes, and the girl had straight blonde hair and hazel eyes. And obviously I have dark hair. I did not see them being my children. And because we would joke about it, my husband was dark haired as well. And he'd say, yeah, if we have kids, those are not our kids. But after I left the hospital, we ended up doing foster care. And those two children were the two children that we adopted. And the minute I saw them, it was like my heart just stopped for a second. I knew that those were the children. And it was a couple of years after I recovered that we did foster care. It took about 1.5 years to adopt my son, and then about a little under 1 year to adopt my daughter. And I didn't know when they came to me that they would be staying or if they'd go back. But those were definitely the children. So we kind of joke now about it. My daughter thinks it's hysterical that they came to me before. But I do feel like the reason they did is it was hard raising 2 kids. Ended up getting divorced when they were 7 and 11. And so having that understanding that they were part of my life before they came here, it kind of gave me that drive to push forward when it was tough. And it was also fun to know their little spirits before they were born and see them in that different light. So my kids are 21 and 25 now, so it's kind of fun to to look back on that. But after about 3 weeks in the hospital, I did actually start healing. And so I was put into a unit called transitional care unit. And I ended up staying at the hospital for 3 months. And during that time at the transitional care unit, they helped me learn to walk again and to talk. And by the time I got there, I had quit having the ability to leave my body. And it was profoundly devastating because it was a reprieve from the pain. And I was still in a lot of pain. They'd left my stomach open because I had to keep going in for surgery. It was just a lot of pain. And I didn't want to be there at the transitional care unit. And that's when I got dark for a minute. I just prayed every day that I would die. But eventually I was released and I started healing, and my hair grew back in. I'd gone pretty much bald. And so for a year and a half, I healed. And then I decided to do one more surgery before we started doing foster care. And this surgery would be my 13th. And it was to kind of help heal a hernia and fix some of the scar damage. And so I did it outpatient. And when I left the hospital, I came home and I was good for like a day. And then my stomach started filling with abscesses and sepsis and infection. And I knew that I was going to go critical. I knew that feeling again, and I knew that I needed surgery. And so I called the on-call doctor and I said, I really do need to get in immediately. And so he said, let's get you in for surgery. I'll get you scheduled. And so before we left, my mom said, can we have one of the neighbors who is over our church come and give me a blessing? And I said, okay. So he and two men came to the house, and as they gave me this blessing, I was laying on my bed and I suddenly felt my soul leave my body again. And I mean, it'd been a year and a half, makes me cry, but I thought, okay, I fulfilled whatever is going to happen in this life and I can leave now, and I'm done. I'm done with the pain and I'm going to be okay. And I told my mom I'm going to leave now. And as I lifted out, I was about 5 feet above my body and I just kind of stayed there. And I could see what was happening around the room, but I also felt thousands and thousands of souls in the room with me, angels, family members, just so much outpouring of love. And then I heard my guide say, this is the last time you're going to leave your body and you're going to heal. And as I heard that, I slowly lifted down into my body again. And I thought, okay, thank you for that gift. Because I'd missed that feeling of love, of being away from the pain. And by this point, I had the surgery where they took off the colostomy bag and they'd fixed everything inside. So I was pretty healthy at that point, besides the surgery. But as the people left and I got ready to go to the hospital, I went into the bathroom to grab my supplies, and I looked down and suddenly the hole in my stomach opened up, like where the main part of the scar was opened up, and the infection just poured out. And as it did, I felt the fever. Like literally it was from here and it just started moving down and it left my body. And I thought, I'm going to be okay. I don't need to have surgery. And so I said to my family, I'm okay. And they're watching this infection gush out, like a horror film. And so I called the doctor and said, I don't think I need to come in. I'm just going to monitor and I'll call you if I need to. And so I went and laid back down. And from that point on, I started healing at a significant rate. I did not have to have surgery. And about a month and a half later, I got my first foster child. So I really, like, the healing process was insanely fast. And the first baby, she was this 25-pound chunk of just love. And I was able to carry her and take care of her because my body had healed. And so I really feel like those souls in the room healed me at a profound rate to be able to take care of the children. And over the next 5 years, we had 25 foster kids and the 2 that we adopted. And I've been able to keep in contact with a few that have left. And my kids, I keep in contact with their family as well, their birth family. And for me, the adoption experience it's been a wild ride, but it's been beautiful. And I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't come back. And so I really feel like I was supposed to come back to take care of my kids and to raise them. And I'm fairly healthy now, considering all that I've been through. I had one surgery 2 months ago. I was having some obstructions from the scar tissue. But other than that, I think I've healed pretty well. And so I'm able to live a pretty amazing life. I'm very active. I'm always out in nature. I like extreme sports. I kind of have an adrenaline rush now because I feel like I need to live more than I would have otherwise. I need to experience every moment. And so I just want to be alive, fully alive, and appreciate everything that I've been given the second chance of. And so I am grateful for this experience. Through it, I have met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise, just beautiful souls. And I didn't talk about this for 25 years because I didn't know how people would react, and it was very special to me. But I was asked to speak at a IANS meeting about 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And that was the first time I spoke about it in public. And I think people need to hear that they don't need to be afraid of dying and that we are loved. And I feel like prayer is very important. Lights of energy every time we pray that kind of shoot up into the sky. is how I see it. But I don't want people to feel alone. And so I do talk with a lot of people through my job. I work with a lot of elderly people, and a lot of them are close to hospice time. And so we're able to talk about how our soul lives on. It's like we're walking from one door to another, and we don't need to be afraid of death. I'm grateful that I can give this experience and share it. And if I can help one person not be afraid, then it's worth it to me. I had read the book by Betty Eady before, but I didn't really know anything about it. And so when I got out of the hospital, I still couldn't walk very well. So I had to go live with my parents, and I went to the library and I got every single book on near-death experiences because my mom said, this is what it's called. And I read every single book. I was looking for the water experience because at the time I thought that everyone was the same because it had been a while since I'd read the Betty Eady book. But I was looking to see how other people explained what I called the healing waters, and they were all different. And so over time, I was like, oh, well, everyone has their own experience. And so it was kind of calming to know that other people had experienced it. But I mean, this is back in like 2000. The internet was not huge back then. And so there weren't a lot of people that could share it online. So I felt kind of alone. I didn't know anyone else that this had happened to. And I didn't talk about it so much. I'd make little comments to my mom. My family, was very aware of what had happened. And so I tell them, I'd seen my grandma in the hospital. I tell, she'd passed. And I'd say, oh, she just told me I need to eat and I'll be okay. And, at the time I really needed to do more than that, but that was important as well. So they were aware of it, and they never questioned it because they know that's not something I would talk about normally if it wasn't true. But as time went on, I started hearing little snippets from other people that had had this experience. And so I felt less alone. But it's weird. It's like you have one foot in this life and one foot in the next, and you don't always feel grounded here. And it can kind of feel alienating sometimes, a little bit lonely. And so when I found the IONS group, it was really helpful because I could talk to other people that had been through this. Even if their experience was very different, there was that same level of understanding the love. It's almost like we have this language that we understand each other's experiences more so. So before, I was young. I was newly married. We're just starting out life. I had all these goals of, going to college and having kids and the normal things, buying a big house and succeeding financially and just living a good life. And now it's kind of shifted. I mean, I think now it's more of you love your fellow man and you give service and you help those around you and you spread love instead of hate. And there's a lot of hate in the world right now. There's so much fighting and war. And it hurts my soul. I wish that people could lead with love and understanding more than with hurt. And so the things that were important then are a little bit less important now. It's more about, again, love. And I have kids now, so making sure that they're safe and happy. But the financial stuff is kind of different now. Like, obviously, you need money to survive, but I don't care if you live in the biggest house and drive the best car. That's not important. Once you leave your body, you leave behind all that, and it's not important. It's your memories of how you treated others and how you loved others. And so it's kind of changed my goals of what is important versus before. It changed me completely. I left religion after, and I know some people that they're like, why? Why would you do that? I didn't feel comfortable in it, and I felt more comfortable in nature. And I think that religion is amazing for some people, and for others, they don't feel comfortable there either. And so I say what works best for you. That's great. I respect either way. But it changed the way I thought spiritually. I'm very, very spiritual now. When I was going to church, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't feel like that's where I was supposed to be. And I hated being there. But now I'll find myself in nature, and I feel like I'm closest to the other side. And I just love that time. I meditate more. I'm definitely more looking into what the future holds of when I leave this life. Like I know that there's life after this and that I will be okay. And this is just a short amount of time that we're on this earth until we go back home, because it is home to me. And I know that I have family waiting there for me. A lot of family, actually. So it's comforting to know that. I'm very close to my family. We get along very well. And so that didn't change. I did stay married for quite a few years afterwards. And then he had an affair, and so we divorced. And we're on good terms now. We've been divorced for 13 years, and we co-parent well together. And so there's that understanding that you leave the hate behind and you forgive. But I'm lucky that I have a really good circle of support around me. And so I feel like it enriched my relationships more. It made me more understanding and empathetic. I'm definitely an empath. I feel people's sorrows and pain and happiness more. And so that can be heavy sometimes. But it definitely helped me to have more compassion for other people and understand if they're going through something, to just give them love, extra love through it and support. That we don't die. We just transition. We don't need to be scared of death. And there is definitely something that comes after this. And it's beautiful and it's just the most amazing amount of love possible. And so when we're in a hard place in this life, we just need to know that I always say this too shall pass. When we go through hard stuff, it will pass. And there's always moments that are sprinkled in there that are miracles and happiness that kind of make up for it. And so we just need to not be so hard on ourselves. I think we, as a society, with social media, we try to be so perfect and look so beautiful. And that's really not what it's about. It's how you love your fellow man. To me, it's just life. It's a continuation of love and peace and welcoming. It's not, we leave our body. Our body is just here for us in this life, but our soul is where our life is. It's our life force. I think everyone just needs to love more profoundly. Love everyone. Forgive those that have hurt you, not for them, but for you, to make your heart lighter. And just spread joy in this world. There's too much hate, and we need to kind of turn the tables and make it a more positive environment. Teach our children to love everyone. That's so important. There doesn't need to be so much division in this world. There needs to be more coming together.